members in this chamber might remember Joh Bjelke-Petersen's horrific vision for Australia. At the heart of his vision with his Joh for Canberra campaign was the notion of a flat tax. That's what Joh campaigned for, and back then he was ridiculed, he was laughed at, he was told that this does not represent the Australia that we believe in. And today, Joh's vision for Australia, flat taxation, dog eat dog, where if you've got a job and doing well, the government will look after you, and if you're down on your luck, well, tough luck. That is the vision that is emerging as the political consensus within this parliament today. Apart from the Greens' strident opposition in this parliament, that is what we are seeing as the emerging consensus position. These are tax cuts that are completely at odds with the notion of an egalitarian Australia. We know what they'll do. They'll rip billions of money out of our budget. They'll gut our schools, our hospitals. They'll stop us from looking after people on Newstart. They'll prevent us from spending the money on infrastructure to modernise our energy system and our transport system. They are going to turbocharge economic inequality in this country. Scott Morrison wants Australia to become Trump's America, with their rampant inequality. He wants to create a permanent underclass of working poor, a privatised health system, massive student debt. That's what happens when you rip billions of dollars out of essential public services and hand it to the wealthiest Australians. This is a disgrace and is being supported by Jackie Lambie and Senator Alliance. They're all for it.
Senator Natale,
trashing by Senator Lambie and the senators from Centre Alliance. They are trashing 100 years of Australia's proudly progressive taxation system for their moment in the spotlight. And I say to Senator Alliance, who aren't in the chamber here today, don't you support funding for schools and hospitals? Don't you support pensions? Don't you support infrastructure? I mean, doing all of that in the name of reducing gas prices, some promise on the never-never. You fell for that. Centre Alliance like to position themselves as a party of the centre. Well, when you support an anti-union agenda, when you get behind tax cuts for big companies, as they did in the previous parliament, when you support greater media concentration, and when you lock in $158 billion in tax cuts that flow to people on high incomes, there's nothing centrist about that. That is the neoliberal hard-right agenda of the Liberal Party, and maybe you should consider where you sit in this chamber. Remarkable that this legislation has never even gone off for an inquiry. The House of Review will be moving today to send this legislation off for inquiry. Nick Xenophon must be turning in his solicitor's office right now at the thought that procedural fairness is being thwarted by his parliamentary team. One of the most significant pieces of economic reform in this country, and it has not even gone before a thorough Senate inquiry. If you're in Mayo, the seat currently held by Senator Alliance, just 2.1% of that community earn over $180,000, and yet they will be the greatest beneficiaries of Stage 3 of this tax cut. $30 billion flowing to the top 2% of that electorate. I very rarely give credit to Senator Hanson. We have very few things in common, but even Senator Hanson sees that only 1.8% of regional Queenslanders earn above $180,000, and that the Prime Minister's electorate of Cook has as many people earning $180,000 as regional Queensland seats of Maranoa, of Dawson and Capricornia combined. And as for Senator Lambie, if you live in Bass and Braddon and you're earning over $180,000, you're in the top 1%. The top 1% of people. And $30 billion from this package flows to only 1% of people in those electorates, the electorates that she purports to represent. In exchange for giving millionaires tax cuts, schools, hospitals in Tasmania will be starved of funds. Support for veterans, money being ripped out of the budget that could support people again that Senator Lambie purports to represent. Every aspect of public investment on the chopping block because of this disastrous decision. And of course, Scott Morrison's playing the opposition.
Natale, you'd refer
The
to
Prime Minister
by
is
his
playing
appropriate
the
title.
opposition like a fiddle. According to reports, you've got Labor frontbenchers saying the party is, and I quote, politically dead if it blocks tax cuts, and they're urging the leader of the opposition, Anthony Albanese, to, and I quote, regain the faith of tradies by backing them. I mean, let's call a spade here. Most tradies don't earn $180,000 a year, and yet $30 billion is flowing to people on over $180,000 each year. Everyday workers aren't going to be the beneficiaries of stage 3 of this tax cuts, and this is the biggest proportion of funding in this package. The median income of working Australians is $58,000. A third of adults aren't actually in work, so when you put those two things together, according to the ABS, the typical Australian's income is actually $37,000. If you abandon all of your beliefs about working people, about fairness, about the opportunities for them, well, in my mind, you're already politically dead. What do you stand for? 100 years of campaigning for progressive taxation, and in a moment, that will be undermined because of the decision of this parliament. 30% of stage 3 goes to the wealthiest Australians. $95 billion ripped away from government revenue. Let's actually look at some of the things that we could be investing in today. Imagine that this parliament came together today, took the revenue that's being ripped out of our budget and said, we want to create a different Australia. Here are some of the things that we could be doing. Every Australian in this country could have Medicare-funded dental care at a cost of less than a third of what is being proposed in these tax cuts, $44.9 billion. Going to the dentist in Australia could become just like going to the doctor. Bring out your Medicare card and you get dental treatment. We could raise Newstart by $75 a week. You want to stimulate the economy? Raise Newstart. You want to make sure that no one in Australia sleeps rough and can put food on the table? Raise Newstart. $55 billion again, just over a third of the cost of this tax package. We could have free childcare for 80% of Australians. Free childcare for 80% of families in this country if we made a decision to do that at a cost of less than half of this package at $77.3 billion. We could lift all public school funding to meet the necessary resourcing standard, $30 billion. Again, making sure that our public schools get the support that they need. Thousands of jobs in restoring our environment and addressing our extinction crisis. Real jobs, employing people, not to destroy the environment, but to care for it, to look after it, to nurture it, to rehabilitate it, at a cost of $20.3 billion under our proposal. Home care packages for older Australians, $23.4 billion. We could build 500,000 affordable homes and address the homelessness crisis in Australia. $84.4 billion, just over half of what's been proposed here today. There's so much more we could do. High-speed rail along the East Coast. There are so many things, so many nation-building projects. modernise our energy system, improve our public transport system. And this is the future that this parliament is turning their back on. To do what? To support the lie of trickle-down economics. Because we know that wealth doesn't trickle down, we know it flows up, it rushes up. And we're going to concentrate more and more wealth into the hands of fewer and fewer people. Now, before the election, the Labor Party were resolute against most aspects of this tax package. The final wash-up of this election is that one seat changed hands. One seat changed hands. And yet we're behaving as though the Morrison government, well, a couple of seats changed hands. A couple of seats changed hands. We're behaving as though the Morrison government has a mandate for these tax cuts. I say, where is your mandate? What was close to people's minds wasn't your agenda for tax cuts. It was the lie. It was the lie on death taxes. It was the confusion about retiree taxes and home taxes. It was uncertainty about what the future held if there was a change of government. And I deeply hope that the Labor Party won't take out the wrong lessons from the election campaign. Because if people want to vote for a watered-down version of the Liberal Party, why wouldn't they vote for the real thing? If you want to turbocharge inequality in Australia, we know where you want to park your vote. Stand against these changes. We know what the Labor Party again said in the lead-up to the election. Chris Bowen, at the time the Shadow Treasurer, made it very clear that the tax cuts were regressive. He said that the $95 billion was poorly targeted. He said that we don't know what the economy is going to be like in 2024. And he said that if Josh Frydenberg's being honest, it's irresponsible.
Senator Natale, for the fourth time.
If the member for Kooyong is being honest, it's irresponsible. Although I will say, Acting Deputy President, it was a quote from the then Shadow Treasurer. So if you're going to make an adjudication, you might want to consider your ruling again. These tax cuts leave income earners short-changed. This was the view of the then Shadow Treasurer. He says, and I quote, "The Liberals are so out of touch they've given a much smaller tax cut to 2 million Australians earning less than $40,000. He's absolutely right. So vote against it. Vote against it. Stage 2 and 3 of the tax cuts, which begin in 2022 and 2024 respectively are, and I quote again, fiscally reckless and irresponsible. Stages 2 and 3 of these tax cuts, and yet here we have the Labor Party supporting at least part of that package and potentially all of it. The now Leader of the Opposition at the time said, and again I quote, "We think that Stage 3, at a cost of some $95 billion down the track, is really a triumph of hope over economic reality." Jim Chalmers, his view was, and again I quote, "It makes no sense to support the third tranche when it comes..."
Senator Natale, just resume your seat for a moment, please. I've asked you many times to refer to members in the other place by their appropriate title. You've failed to do so. Now you want to admonish...
Made it very clear. And again, I quote, "It makes no sense..."
Sorry, Senator Natale, I've asked you to refer to members by their appropriate title. Now you've just repeated Jim Chalmers again and again and again. Well, just Mr. Chalmers would do fine. Just use some courtesy and try to obey the standing orders.
I'll seek to have this ruling addressed in a moment, but I do make the point that we have on many occasions referred to members of parliament by their full names, and that has not been ruled out of order, and so I'll seek to deal with that at a future time.
Standing orders are very clear. You should refer to them by their appropriate
Mr. Chalmers
title.
said, and I quote, "It makes no sense to support the third tranche, which comes in 5 years away from now and overwhelmingly favours those who are least likely to spend it in the economy." He also went on to say, and I quote, "What I don't accept is the tax cuts that they're proposing 5 years down the track which overwhelmingly flow to people who are least likely to spend in the economy, it's obviously a con job for the government to pretend that they would have any impact on the slowing economy today. All absolutely correct. All absolutely correct. And we absolutely support those statements, which is why we hope that the Labor Party will join us in making a clear and unequivocal statement that it will repeal stage 3 of these tax cuts into the next election. We must get an unambiguous and clear commitment that stage 3 of these tax cuts will be repealed. They are enriching the wealthiest in our society. We know our budget can't afford it, but we've heard comment after comment from members of the opposition who have said absolutely clearly that stage 3 of these tax cuts do not warrant support, and we must address it. They've seen the same costings as the rest of us. They've seen the Grattan Institute, the Australia Institute, research that shows that these tax cuts overwhelmingly benefit wealthy Australians. Now, that men benefit twice as much as women, entrenching gender inequality even further. And again, I say don't take it just from the Greens, take it from former Senator Doug Cameron, who said that Labor should back the first tranche of tax cuts, but anything further was, and I quote, a con job. He went on to say, we must not capitulate to News Corp and the big end of town by becoming Liberal light. Well, we couldn't have said it any clearer ourselves. When I hear tax cuts, I hear cuts to hospitals, I hear cuts to education, I hear cuts to schools, I hear cuts to pension, I hear cuts to New Start. That's what tax cuts are a euphemism for. And of course there are alternatives. We'll move later today to make sure that people on low incomes do get some support. They'll get more cash in their pocket, but not by adjusting tax thresholds, not by flattening our tax system, but by ensuring that they get some support, but that we increase New Start by $75 a week, that we raise the funding for our public schools, that we introduce Medicare-funded dental care, that we build 500,000 affordable homes. We will do all of those things because we do see the tax system as a powerful tool for addressing economic inequality in Australia. We cannot cave in to this trickle-down neoliberal agenda. We as a nation have fought hard to maintain a progressive taxation system as a means of addressing turbocharged economic inequality. It's getting worse, and a decision of this parliament to unwind the tax system in one of the most significant changes that has ever come before this place would be a huge mistake. So let me finish by saying the Greens unequivocally oppose this tax package. The argument that somehow stage 3 doesn't take effect for a number of years and therefore we need to pass it and have some chance of reversing it is a furphy and it's a nonsense. If this package does pass with the support of Senator Alliance and Senator Lambie, then we must commit to repealing it. There are alternatives. Those alternatives will make Australia a fairer, more decent society. And we must resist at every opportunity the path towards Trump's America, where our tax system is flattened, where economic inequality is worse, and where our essential public services are run down.